What we're going to look at in this vodcast is a technique called dimensional analysis. Dimensional analysis is simply a problem-solving technique to solve problems that involve units. And there's two basic types of problems that we'll do throughout this year. The first type is conversion problems with units, and the second type will be math problems with units. This vodcast is going to focus on conversions. So let's go to our first slide. What we want to do is develop this technique to help us solve problems, to help us convert from units to units. And it's a pretty simple process, but you've got to know a few things about the process before we get started. So, what we want to do is convert units. So we want to convert from 56 inches to feet. Basically, 56 inches is the distance that if you spread your hands apart as far as possible, that's roughly 56 inches, and that'll be roughly 4 feet. Well, what we want to do is use dimensional analysis to do this conversion for us, so then we can apply this technique to tougher problems. The whole idea behind dimensional analysis is the conversion factor. And a conversion factor is nothing more than a fraction. You've got your numerator and you've got your denominator. And it's based on a relationship of units. For example, since we're dealing with inches and feet, what I'm going to say is there are 12 inches in 1 foot. So that's the relationship. 12 inches is equivalent to 1 foot. Well, what that means is that we can write a fraction with that. We can say 1 foot over 12 inches. Now, essentially, the value of that fraction is 1, since the numerator and denominator are equivalent, but we don't need to worry too much about that right now. You can also write this fraction the opposite way. You can write it 12 inches over 1 foot. And that's a very important aspect about conversion factors. Once you know the relationship between the units, you can write them in a fraction either way. And then we'll use whichever fraction we need to solve the problem. Okay, when you go to start a problem, you always start with the given information. So we're going to start with 56.6 inches. Now what you want to do is set up a conversion factor, or a fraction, to convert from inches to feet. The way we're going to do this is whatever we start with always goes in the denominator of the first conversion. If you can remember that rule alone, that's probably 80% of the problem. Whatever unit you start with goes in the denominator of the first conversion factor, almost without exception. So what we're going to do is use this conversion factor. Inches in the denominator, feet in the numerator. And then you're going to plug in your values. 1 foot is equivalent to 12 inches. The idea now is that inches is in the numerator, inches is in the denominator, so the two will cancel each other out. What's left over then is the unit feet. So when we do the math here, let's get our calculators out and take 56.6 inches and, whoops, let's try that again. Let's take 56.6 inches and divide by 12, and we get 4.72. So we get 4.72. And again, the unit that's left is feet. So what we've said is that 56.6 inches is equal to 4.72 feet. And that's about what we said in the beginning. If you spread your arms apart as far as possible, that would be roughly 4.72 feet. So oftentimes in this class, you're going to be asked to convert one unit to another, and you're going to do that by finding a relationship, making a fraction, and then using that fraction in the problem. Okay, let's take a look at what we refer to as a multi-step problem. Let me get myself a new pen here. In a multi-step problem, you have to use more than one conversion factor. So let's start our problem. We have 0.035 miles. And what we want to do now is convert to inches. So again, set up your first conversion factor. And what was the rule? The unit that we start with goes in the denominator. Now you've got to think, well, what do I know about miles? I don't know how many inches there are in a mile, but I do know that there are 5,280 feet in 1 mile. That's information that would be given to you if you didn't know that off the top of your head. So what we can say is there's 5,280 feet in 1 mile. That way our miles will cancel and now we have feet. But we don't want feet, we want inches. So we're going to set up another conversion. Whatever we have in the numerator, we want to put in the denominator because we want to cancel it. And I do know what's the relationship between feet and inches. I know there's 12 inches in 1 foot. So this way, our feet will cancel. So now when we do the math here, again, take out your calculator, and we will do 0.035 times 5,280 times 12, and we get 2,217.6 inches. Now we're not going to worry about the significant figures right now. We'll cross that bridge a little bit later. So we've converted 0.035 miles to inches. Okay, let's convert 56,000 seconds to days. We've got 56,000 seconds, and we want to go to days. So set up your conversion factor. Seconds in the denominator. I know there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. My seconds cancel. My next conversion, I've got minutes, so I'm going to put minutes in the denominator. I know that there are 60 minutes in an hour. And then I'm going to convert hours to days by saying 24 hours in 1 day. Let's do the math. 56,000 divided by 60 divided by 60 divided by 24, and we get 0.65 days. So we've just converted seconds to days.